Hello again. We're going to get back on our 302 rebuild here. One thing you can see that I've done offline is I installed the timing gears. We're going to go over that installation a little bit. It's not something you necessarily important that you see. It's really straightforward. But we'll go over it and a few of the key issues. First of all, this is a Chloe's double roller timing gear set. Brand new, and it's, as you can see, it's a double roller chain, and it comes with both the crank gear and the timing gear, or the camshaft gear. So the installation is just as simple as it appears. You basically take and you line up your marks. In the case of a small block Ford, that lineup should be this dot and this dot, and they should be close to one another. And you put your chain around there, and basically you just slide it on. It goes over the Woodruff key here on the crank, and then on the camshaft it aligns with a dowel. Here's the dowel. You can see it right underneath the washer of that retainer bolt. And a couple of options. First, when you get your camshaft, if you've never dealt with one before, that dowel that I just showed you won't necessarily, probably not be in the cam, and so you just have to put it in yourself. It's just a straight push-in pin. It's quite easy to do. Now, most cams will come with 2 pins. Here's the extra pin for my cam. This pin is longer than that pin. The reason is, if you're going to run a mechanical fuel pump, you would put a fuel pump eccentric behind this bolt. So it would ride here behind this bolt. And that fuel pump eccentric, or that pin, needs to pass through that fuel pump eccentric, so it rotates when the camshaft gear rotates on the timing chain. So in my case, I'm running an EFI system with an electric fuel pump to generate higher pressures, and so I'm not going to put a fuel pump eccentric on this motor. I gave consideration to go ahead and putting a fuel pump eccentric on here and just blinding off the fuel pump location on the timing cover, but I decided against it. I figured just if somebody wants to run a mechanical fuel pump on here at some point, it's just a matter of lifting the timing cover off, taking this bolt out, taking the pin out, take the gears off, take the pin out, put in a longer pin, and then put the fuel pump eccentric on, retorque. So it's it's a job. It's not a huge job. So I figure if somebody wants to do it later, they can. It may end up being me. I don't know. I may carburet this motor at some point, and if I do, that's a task I'll have to take on. It also saved me buying a new timing cover. I'm going to reuse the old timing cover, and even though it doesn't have a mechanical fuel pump access point, I don't need it, so why not? Then let's talk about timing retard advance. The Chloe's gear set, and there's different gear sets out there that have different options. The Chloe's gear set basically gives you 3 options. You'll see there's a pin, Woodruff pin location here, one here, and then there's one here on the other side. And basically, if you rotate this, you take this gear off and you rotate it to line up with one of these others, you're either going to get 2 degrees of camshaft advance, timing advance, or you're going to get 2 degrees of timing retard. It's actually 4 degrees on the crank, 2 degrees on the cam, because the cam's a 2-to-1 ratio. Camshaft's 2-to-1 ratio to the crank. In this case, I went with a 0 timing alignment. This is factory 0 timing. The reason I did is we'll be able to get some advance and retard if we want it off the distributor, but in this case, since I'm running the MSD Atomic EFI, it has electronic timing control, and they recommend, after I called them, they recommended that you just leave it at 0 timing on the gears, and so that's what we've done. Anyway, this particular bolt, again, use the torque lubricant, and it goes to 40 foot-pounds, and bam, you're there. It's just that simple. Not much on the timing system. If you want to make sure you got it right, one thing I did, if you come over here and you look through these holes, let's see if I got a flashlight here. If you look through the lifter holes, you can kind of get some estimation of what's going on. In this case, you can pretty much tell, I can tell here visually. Is probably hard for you on video, but the cam at number one's at top dead center. That's based on that mark being at the top as well. And both your lobes are down. You're on the base of the cam. If you go to number two is, you turn the crank, you can see it. It's on the downstroke right now. And if you look up in here, the number, this is the exhaust on the left, intake is on the right, and the intake lobe is up, which tells us that this thing should be on the intake stroke, and in fact it is. So it just gives you a rough, confirmation that you didn't get 180 out or something on your cam gears. Just check and see. Generally, when you buy your materials, in this case with this Chloe cam set, see if I can find it here. It came with a car. Basically, it came with an instruction set. Probably hard for you to see, but on this instruction set, that shows you what a GM Chrysler alignment looks like, what a Ford alignment looks like, and so it's all laid out for you pretty well. It's not hard. Actually, it's relatively hard to get it wrong. So anyway, that's the timing gears installed. So we're good with that part. Now we're going to spin this motor over and start assembling the oil pump, windage tray, and oil pickup. All right, as you can see, we flipped the motor over. Now we're going to install the oil pump. One thing of note, this particular oil pump, this is a Melling high volume oil pump. It's an let's see here. It's an M86 HV. M86 is for 302 application, HV is for high volume, and so this is a high volume pump. It comes with two gaskets. One gasket for the oil pickup tube and one gasket for the base of the oil pump. The one with the larger hole in the center is for the oil pickup tube. The smaller hole is for the base of the oil pump. This particular one, it impinged just a touch on the counterweight, the forward counterweight on the crank, so I gave it just a little bit of a trim right along there, just so it doesn't. There's plenty of coverage. I could actually trim it back to the metal, but it should be fine. I put a dab of high temperature RTB on there. Try not to put too much. You don't want it squeezing into your oil space, but I like to have a little just to keep us from leaking. Not that there's a problem there. It's going to leak back in the oil pan, but that just cuts your volume. Let's talk a little bit about the fact that we're using a high volume oil pump. One of my concerns, I've got to call into Melling now to confirm it, but after talking to Craig Kalk at the racing speed shop, he got to do our heads and do our pistons for us, and he suggested that a high volume oil pump could potentially empty your oil pan contents up into the motor. Basically pumps up faster than it can return to the oil pump. There's two ways to deal with that. Go with the stock oil pump, which sounds good, but I already bought this oil pump, and well, that's time to return it. One of the other options is to put a large oil pan on here. This is, as we talked earlier, I'm going to put the stock oil pan back on here. It's a 5-quart oil pan. And I think I'm going to end up changing that out at some point to a 7-quart oil pan. It's one way to resolve that issue. I like excess oil flow. Obviously, I don't want to stack up too bad in my motor, which is one reason we're checking all of our oil drain galleys to make sure that we don't have any excess flash or blockage with gaskets, things like that. We want to get as much oil return as we can. But I like the idea, the comfort of having high volume on it. I did a bunch of research, a bunch of conversation with, read a bunch of conversation from various people, and I've heard everything from it's a terminal decision to it's no big deal to run a high volume oil pump. I'm going with a high volume. We'll see where it takes us. I think it, reasonably low RPM, the pump rate won't be so high that it'll cause a problem, but at high RPM it might. So for now, we're going to go with stock oil pan. Potentially, we're going to change to a 7-quart pan later. Once we actually get the truck ready and see exactly how everything's going to mount up, we'll make a better decision about the oil pan. For now, it's not going to be running high RPM on the test stand. So we're going to just stay with what we got. So anyway, we'll move this one out of the way for now. The oil pump, I put a Oh, one other thing while I'm thinking about it, if you buy a used motor like this from a junkyard and you're going to put it back together in a mutated form like we're doing here, keep everything. Bag and tag all your bolts. Bag and tag all your equipment and keep it. Keep it until you're sure you don't need it. Let me show you down here. This is, these are an infinite number, it seems like, of Ziploc bags. Each one of them is tagged with where the parts came from. This is an example. We need our oil pump bolts. No problem, we've got them. Had we just, randomly thrown away things that we didn't think we needed and then we later needed them, well, that'd be a bad place. So when you set the oil pump, don't forget the drive shaft. Without the drive shaft, the oil pump's worthless. If you look, let us see if we can see it here. Where are we going? There we go. If you'll look through between the first counterweight, here's the first counterweight, and the first block, main, excuse me, get my flashlight. You're going to see a hole down there. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. There we go. You'll see that hole down there. That hole is what mates up with the bottom of the distributor, which drives your oil pump. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our oil pump drive shaft, which has a little collet here on the end, keep it from slipping all the way through, and we're going to put it into that hole, and that's our first act of installing the oil pump. Make sure your drive shaft's in place. Real bummer if it's not. So then we've got our oil pump. We put a small amount of RTV on the bottom side of the oil pump, and then we have to install it and mate that drive shaft with this hole. This is the drive gear for the oil pump. So we're going to go ahead and do that and get it bolted on. Okay, so the oil pump's on, torqued down. As always, we use our torque lubricant on the bolts. One thing you need to be concerned about, this is not a stock oil pump. It presumably fits. It was purchased to fit, but it's not stock. Check your clearances. Check your clearances on everything when you're building a motor like this, where you're not going back with all stock parts. And truthfully, with even stock parts, you need to watch for fitment clearances, but particularly when you're not using stock materials. You can see the drive shaft here, I hope. I can see it. Let's see if you can. It goes up into the oil pump here at this point, and it's in there. It's also bottomed into the distributor hole, so we're good to go on that part. Took the actual priming tool, stuck in there, and made sure it would turn, and then two bolts are in here and here, and torqued down. So that part's good. Now we're going to grab our windage tray, which is just over here, and we're going to set our windage tray on. And I spoke before, we've got to check clearances, particularly on the windage tray. Again, not a stock part, and it can really mess you up. While I'm thinking about it, let me also cover something else. On this motor, and for that matter, on any motor, check your bolt holes. Check what your bolts are going into. In this particular situation, we got two bolts. One's going into the block here, one's going into the block, actually comes out the outside of the block. Sorry for that interruption. What I was saying is, check and see where your bolt holes are going. Any place where it might be going into a water jacket, you need to put a sealer, not a torque lubricant, because there are a number of places where you have bolts that do go into water jackets, particularly on the heads, but I just want to be cautious and check everywhere else as well. This particular one goes into the area here by the crank. This particular one comes out and goes through a hole here in the face of the block. So I'm not worried terribly about any leakage there, but I would be worried if that had been a water jacket area, and I would have used an RTV sealant on those threads. So, windage tray, it's a simple set on, 4 bolts, 4 nuts down over those studs, and you're there. Looks pretty rock solid to me. we will see. Next thing we've got to put on here, if I can find it, is the old pickup tube. Now, as I stated before, I think I'm using the stock oil pickup tube because we're not going with an aftermarket pan. Therefore, I'm not going with an aftermarket pickup tube. This particular pickup tube is in really good shape. Cleaned it up. The screen's in good shape. Everything looks nice. So I don't see any issues with it. Now, again, one of the reasons I'm using it is because if I go on with an aftermarket pan for higher volume, then it'll immediately require a higher volume or a different geometry on the old pickup tube. So again, we're going to let that wait. We're going to wait and make sure that the truck, we meet the needs of mounting in the truck. I mean, heck, this thing may end up having to go front sump or something. I'm not sure yet till we get the frame rolled in here and get to work on the suspension on the front end, things like that. So this little guy will go up underneath here and then go over that bolt, and it works well. So there you go. Now you've got a gasket, some sealer, 2 bolts, and you connect this here. One nut goes on here to hold that in place, and then you've got your oil pickup tube. And one thing I'm also going to do, I'm not sure about the height of this pump, whether it's the same height. It looks to be about the same height as the other one. I will also check the clearance between here and the bottom of the pan. In order to do that, we're going to take a small Ziploc bag. We're going to put some peanut butter in it, and we're going to lay it up on here. And we're going to put the pan on top of that, press the pan down without a gasket. You can do it with a gasket, doesn't matter, but I'll do it without the gasket, seat it against the oil pan surface there, and we'll let that peanut butter compress down, and then we'll lift the pan off and we'll gauge the distance there, the amount of peanut butter between this point and the bottom of the pan, and you're looking for about 3/8 of an inch is preferred, and so that's how we'll gauge that out. I'm sure there's other ways to do it besides peanut butter, but hey, it's peanut butter, why not? So anyway, 2 bolts, and then we'll check this gap against the oil pan, and hopefully that part of the motor will be largely finished, and we'll install the oil pan. So I'll check back. Well, this is why we're very careful about clearances. We got the, as you saw, we got the oil pump on, we got the windage tray on. I went in and put on the oil filler tube, and we now do not have clearances here. You can see the space where my finger is. Same on the opposite side, and it's hitting on the oil pump. So stock oil pump, no working. So I mean stock oil pan rather. So it looks like we're going to take that oil pan, oil pickup tube step that I was talking about earlier, and so that's why you check clearances. These we're taking a stock motor and making it non-stock, and so these things we have to deal with. So I'll make some calls tomorrow probably and make a choice on which oil pan I want to use, which oil pickup tube matches it, and that's what we'll do. I'm going to assume right now a rear sump, only because I think with the front end suspension I'm putting in the truck, front sump, or rather rear sump would be the right choice. So we're going to stay with the rear sump for now. Hopefully I'm right about that. Be fairly costly if we have to go to front sump, but an old truck like this, they're generally dimensioned out, so the rear sumps are the right choice. Anyway, I'll close this video for now and check again. Take care. Bye.